Hello, welcome to First Steps on Real C++. My name is Felix and I will help guide you through setting up your work environment and getting your first Unreal project running and coding in C++. And also we'll set up the repository so that you can start source versioning with GitHub. So on the agenda today, I'll introduce a little bit what we're going to do again, and we're going to go over software requirements and then making the project in the repository, compiling our code in a few different ways, and we'll finish with Hello World. So yeah, I'm going to guide you through starting a C++ Unreal Engine project. And then we're going to look at the code, some shortcuts, make sure you can compile and do Hello World. And afterwards, I'll give a few pointers on what to do next to continue your dev journey. So the software requirements will be Unreal Engine, of course. I'm using 5, the latest version, 5.5.3. Then you will need a Git client. You can pick any that you'd like. Today I'm using GitHub Desktop, which is free and meets what we want to do. And for the code IDE, I highly recommend JetBrains Writer. I've tried this one in Visual Studio, and I think that Writer has a better support for Unreal Engine coding in C++. And now it's free for non-commercial use, so you can easily download and install this and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is to launch Unreal Engine 5 and make our project. You'll see that in this workshop, a lot of steps take a long time. It might be faster on my machine, or you might be faster. So it's very convenient for this to be in video form. So using the Epic Game Launcher, I'm going to launch the Unreal Engine. And while this is happening, we can switch over to GitHub to create our repository. An important detail happens here in the name choice. You cannot choose the same name as your project as it will cause a conflict whenever you're trying to put the files of one in the other. So I highly recommend for you to append a name, like for example repo. So that my repository name for today will be UE5 CPP Workshop Repo. And try to keep the name as short as possible because in Unreal C++, they will use the project name and prepend it to the C++ class name. So having a short name will be very helpful. And then afterwards, I'm going to leave the repo public and I'm going to add a README file. And what's very important is to choose the correct git ignore, which will be Unreal Engine. Okay, so now we notice that Unreal has opened the project creation pop-up. So we're going to switch to the Games tab. For the template, I'm going to choose first person today. You can pick any that you'd like, but I like to starting with the first person. And now the important settings are to click C++ as it will be a C++ project. And I like to uncheck starter content. If it's checked, I will remove it. It will just make the project creation faster, and if you actually need this later, you can manually add it. Then you pick the project name. So it's the same thing as the repository name, but without the repo at the end. If possible, again, make sure that your project and your repo is on an SSD, as frequent interactions with memory will be improved on an SSD, and this happens very often during game development. So that will make your game dev experience much more enjoyable to put all of these on an SSD. So now we're going to go to GitHub Desktop and clone the repository while the UE5 project is being created. So when you're searching for your new repository, it might not be in the list and you'll just have to refresh and wait for it to show up. And now we just wait. So with the project having opened, I'm going to actually close the editor and move it into the local repository. This will be a good point in time to do this operations, and we're going to do our first commit and push also. So I close the editor, I browse to the folder that contains both the project and the repository. So in GitHub Desktop, there's a convenient button there. So I locate the repository. It's going to be this one since it's empty. And then I locate the project, so it's the other one. So I'm going to take every files here and cut. I'm going to go back to the local repository and paste the files in there. And going back to GitHub Desktop, we're going to notice the changes with all of these files that have been added. So I highly recommend doing this setup early, doing frequent commit and pushes. That it alleviates a lot of risks in the future of trying to push large files, and also having this versioning early allows you to also go back in time whenever necessary. So we do a commit and a push, and then we wait for the push to finish, and we'll be able to verify that GitHub has received our work by refreshing the page. So let's get ready to compile. So we need to reopen the project since it was closed. I couldn't just use the uproject file here to conveniently open the editor. So I just double click on that, and this time it should be much faster to open since the project has been created. Okay, so compilation can be confusing at first because there are multiple steps and multiple phases where this can happen. But before we get to that, let's make sure that your project is correctly linked to Writer. So we go and edit, editor preferences, source code, and make sure that Writer is selected in the drop down here if it's not already. So when this is done, we're going to open any C++ file. I'm going to do Control Space to open the doc at the bottom of the screen. And then I'm going to pick a CPP file. I'm going to pick the character as it's convenient. So I'll just double click there and Writer will open. So from this point forward, you will get a lot of pop-ups, so pay close attention. So this first one here is about whether you trust and you really want to open this project. Well, since it's yours, then of course you will trust and open. Here I make a small mistake as I quadruple click the asset and it opens Writer twice. I'm going to close it. For you, you might have different pop-ups since you're on a different machine. So make sure to carefully read and select the correct choices. For me, I accept all of them. It's mostly about security or wanting to include or exclude some files to improve performance. These pop-ups will appear on the bottom right of your editor. So pay attention to that area. And now we're waiting for background tasks. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a loading bar, and that's the progress of the background tasks. Here I close the editor as it's not needed for this part, and it will free up some resources for your computer, so it'll be able to perform its background tasks better. And now we just wait and we pay attention to pop-ups happening on the bottom right of the screen. If this is your first time loading and running Writer, it might take a significant amount of time. So feel free to pause here, or if you're done, fast forward in the video. All I do here is just wait for pop-ups, accept everything, and wait for background tasks to complete. Okay, so finally the background tasks are coming to an end. We see some colors appear in the code, which is generally a very good sign. So the next step is going to do a build. So a build will compile the code and check to see if there's errors. You can do a build by going at the top. There will be a drop down that you can click, and you can also do it with a hotkey, which is Control F9. So that's the next step. We're going to build and wait. There might be more pop-ups that we have to accept. Okay, so now the new background tasks are done, and the next part is going to read the run. So we'll be able to see the editor again. So to run, you can click at the top the green arrow, or you'll notice that the hotkey will be Shift F10. And this will be necessary to run the code and open the editor so we can do the next steps. Okay, with the editor open again, what I like to do now is to just run and see what's going on with the base project. So it's a first person project. You can pick up this toy gun and then shoot yellow small projectiles. That's great. And what we'd like to do next, just as a code, tradition, is to display hello world on the top left of the screen. So we're going to do this, compile, and hopefully see the message appear. So one thing that you need to learn now in Rider is the most important hotkey, which is Shift Shift. So if you press on Shift twice on your keyboard, you are going to open this search and find anything pop up. You can search for classes, files, even actions, which can be hotkeys for you to learn or to change if you'd like. So we want to find the hotkey that will toggle between the source file and the header file. As you know, in C++, we'd like to declare functions in the header. So if I type header here, I see the hotkey being mentioned as F10. It might be different for you if you're using a different set of hotkeys, but for me, it's F10. I can search for other hotkeys. So for example, if I want to know the hotkey for moving a line up and down in the code, I can search for move line. And I see here that it's going to be Alt Shift Up to move a line upwards. So this Shift Shift hotkey is fundamental and crucial in Rider. Okay, so now let's use F10 to go to the header file, and we're going to override the begin play function. As you recall in Unreal Engine, begin play is a function that's called as soon as the game starts. So I could put my hello world printing in the constructor of the character, but I'd like to avoid that as the constructor is called at various points in the editor. Whenever the character is first placed in the scene when a game runs, I'd prefer to do this logic in begin play. So I'm going to type begin play here. Notice that Rider is suggesting the override keyword to me, which is correct, as begin play will override a function from a base class. I press tab to accept this suggestion, and then I need to implement this function definition. So I use Alt Enter as a hotkey to see the list of quick actions and fixes I can apply. And generally the first one is the best choice, and it is in this case. So I will generate the function definition. So I press enter, and conveniently I'm being taken to where this new definition is. Okay, so to do and print hello world now is not as short and concise as other languages or game engines perhaps. And you have to call the add on screen message function on the engine. I've provided the code on the slides for you to copy paste, but it's also a very good practice to just type it out. So here, Rider recommends this line to me, which is mostly correct, but I do want to change the message to hello world, so I'm going to edit the final string parameter. Everything else can be kept, so it will be displayed in red color. It will be displayed for 5 seconds, and the message key will be -1, which makes it independent from the other messages. Okay, so now you might be tempted to think that the next step is Control F9 or maybe Shift F10, but the editor is already running, and we cannot build while this is running. So you could close it and build and run, and it would work. But conveniently, there's something called live coding, which allows you to do changes in the code and have the editor create a patch and apply it to the engine that's already running. You do have to be careful with this as it works well for minor changes and for a short period of time. As you code more and more for a longer period, it will be a better practice to, at that time, close the editor, do a build, and run it. So the hotkey for live coding is Control Alt F11. So as you press Control Alt F11, you will see this live coding pop up here. If you see green text, that's a good sign. And we wait for it to finish, and hopefully we will see even more green text. You see live coding succeeded, and we now are going to press play and look at the top left of the screen to see if we notice the hello world. And it is there, and we're happy. So now, to follow good practices, whenever we finish a feature, we will do a commit and push. So we've just added hello world, and so I will do a commit for this and push it to the repository. So what are the next steps for you? Well, I highly encourage you to attend the upcoming workshops by my colleagues that will build upon what we've done today. Look at these resources I've listed. Think about some fun changes that you can do in the game. Perhaps you would like to make the yellow projectile bigger, so you could do that in the projectile class itself, or perhaps you could go in the weapon class and you'll see the line where the weapon will instantiate the projectile. So then you can modify the scale afterwards. So this is my recommendation, to come up with creative and fun ways that motivate you to modify the base project and build your understanding of C++ and the game engine this way, little by little. Taking small steps is the way to go to do this iteratively, as if some error happens, it will be easier to fix. If you need help with anything, don't hesitate to reach out to me, whether on Microsoft Teams or on Discord. I will be happy to provide assistance and help. And that's it for our workshop. Thank you for watching, and best of luck with your game dev journey.